Hi everybody and welcome once again to Ruby's Classic Cooking. Today I'm making lasagna. I've got my lasagna noodles right here. Get started with, well, not to get started with, but when I'm finished with my sauce. This is an old recipe I got from a friend of my mom's years and years ago, back in the 70s, the early 70s. And I make it every once in a while, especially on a cold, rainy, yucky fall day, which are not my favorite fall days. It's really warming and really nice dinner to have. I've got my nice big heavy duty saucepan here. It's about a 10 cupper. And I just put in enough olive oil to cover the bottom of it. You can use another kind of oil if you like, but I like to use olive oil. And then I'm going to cut up an onion and put that in there. And I'm going to put these mushrooms on. And I'm going to a nice heavy dash of garlic powder. Then I'm going to take that out of there. You can also add, oh by the way, you can put green pepper in there too if you like, but I'm not fond of green pepper, so I don't put it in there. Then I'm going to brown about 1.5 pounds of hamburger, or about 750 grams of hamburger. So there you go. And then I'm going to be adding some other things to it, some tomato sauce, some tomato paste. I'm going to be adding some cayenne pepper and bay leaf, and then I'm going to put on and a little bit of salt and a little bit of sugar, and then I'm going to be putting that on my stove to simmer. Oh yes, and a bit of basil as well. Then I'm going to put that on to simmer for about 2.5 hours, and while I'm doing that, I've got cheese I'm going to grate, mozzarella cheese, and I'm going to be also adding a secret ingredient. So Jim, plug your ears. I'm going to be adding cottage cheese, Parmesan cheese, and mozzarella cheese to my lasagna. Now this makes an enormous batch, and there's just the two of us, and I'm kind of running out of room in my freezer, so I think what I'm going to do is make a full batch of the meat sauce. Then I'm going to cook some of the noodles that I need for one casserole, and then I'll just put together one 8-cup casserole, which will be enough for 2 meals or more for my husband and I. And then that's my trusty old cornyware casserole coming out again. And then I'll put it together and put it in the oven for half an hour, 325-degree oven, which I think is 163 degrees Celsius. Don't worry, I'll have all the Celsius equivalents in the bottom of this, at the bottom when I write my description file after I'm finished. So anyway, I have to cook these lasagna noodles because they're not the kind that you just can use straight from the box. I prefer to cook my lasagna noodles. A bit old school that way. Anyway, so then I'll have this rest of the sauce, I'll freeze it, and in the future I'll thaw out the sauce and make some more lasagna. I'll just have to cook up my noodles and have my cheeses on hand, so it won't take me very long to put it together. I'm just going to mince up my onion here for you. It's quite easy to do. I just do slices first. I know there's probably a more chefy and more efficient way of doing this, but you know, this works for me. And I'm not really super fussy about that they're nice, neat, even cubes or whatever. I just want them to be small enough to kind of disintegrate into my sauce as I cook it. And they will. And I just make sure there's nothing quite this large. I just kind of cut that up a bit. And then I'll just do up my whole onion like this. And the mushrooms, it was the same price whether your mushrooms were sliced or not. I thought, I want sliced mushrooms. Why not buy the sliced ones? So I did. So I took a little cheat there. Always check when you're buying something to see if it's more expensive to buy the prepared or the not. And if it's not, then save yourself a bit of work and buy the pre-prepared one. If it's more expensive, then hey, I can take 5 minutes and slice up some mushrooms. And if they're going to do it for me for the same price, what the heck? I'm as lazy as the next person. Anyway. Okay. I'm going to put my saucepan on to heat. And then I'm going to brown, it says to brown the onions and brown your mushrooms. So that's what I'm going to do. Sometimes it just says to sweat them, but this time it's saying to brown them. So I'll get a little bit of color on them before I pull them off. I'll be right back. I'm back again, and my mushrooms And my onions are nicely browned. I think you can see that in there. There we go. See that in there? It's getting a shadow on it. I don't know why. Anyway. And I'm going to put that in my bowl. And I'm going to put my chuck in here. It says ground chuck. And I've got some nice lean hamburger that I ground myself. That's going to go in there to be done. So I did add a bit more olive oil to this afterwards. Now it seems to be swimming a bit in olive oil, but it seemed to need it. Now, the recipe calls for canned mushrooms because in those days, fresh mushrooms are practically unobtainable. So nowadays, we really try and find canned mushrooms when fresh mushrooms are so much nicer. So I just got, and it was an 8-ounce, 227 gram pack of sliced mushrooms that I happened to find. So that's what I put in here. I dumped the whole pack in here. So, don't worry, I'll have the recipe written up down below in my description file. In my description down below. There we go. So, now, this ground beef, this ground beef is just going to go right into my hot pan. And I'm going to brown that up now on the stove top. And then I'll come back and show you what happens next, because next I'm going to put this back in here. And then I'm going to add some tomato sauce and some other ingredients to that. Tomato sauce, tomato paste, and some other things to it. And then bubble it on the stove for about 2.5 hours to get it nice and thickened down. And get the flavors to combine and get it all cooked down on the stove. And here's my lean ground beef, all nice and browned. And I'm beginning to think, looking at how full this pot is, that maybe I should have used a bigger pot to start with. So you know what? I'm just going to transfer everything into a larger saucepan. So, here goes my meat. I'm just going to transfer that into there. Don't worry, I'll probably rinse this one out and use it to cook my noodles in. And in here goes my mushrooms and my onions and the rest of the oil that was left on there. So in that goes. All right. Stir those together. Okay. Now I'm ready to start adding some of my other ingredients. I've got my tomato sauce. This is a 380 milliliter can, which I think it's about a 19-ounce can of tomato sauce. And I've got here a 369 milliliter can of tomato paste, and I think that's probably about a 12, I'd say that's probably a 12-ounce can of tomato sauce, tomato paste. Okay, now I'm also supposed to add 2 teaspoons of salt, which I'm probably not going to add a whole 2 teaspoons of salt. Back in the 70s, people used a lot more salt when they were cooking than today, so I'm just going to use like maybe a generous teaspoon of salt in there. And they were very light on other spices to compensate, I guess. So I'm probably going to add about half a teaspoon of basil. I'm just kind of, I don't get real precise when I'm cooking. When I'm baking, you have to be much more precise. But when you're cooking like this, then you're supposed to use a dash of cayenne pepper, which nowadays you probably add a lot more than a dash of the stuff, because people like things a little spicier nowadays than they did back then. And a bay leaf. You know what these things are, right? They have a lovely smell to them. Some people say, why do you cook with them? Because they don't add anything. I disagree. I find they do add something. Maybe that's the same sort of thing that means the difference between people who think that cilantro tastes like soapy water, tastes like soap. Maybe that's why I can taste it, and why I don't really care for the smell of parsnips at all. I'm just going to stir my herbs in here to my sauce, and then I'm going to add 2 cups of water to this. And in order to make the best use of my water, I'm going to pour it in here. I'll rinse out my cans like this. Just a bit more of your tomato sauce and tomato paste out of your cans if you do this. And I like to do that. Why wait? Why waste perfectly good tomato sauce or tomato paste? But all I need to do is rinse out my cans a little bit. I rinse them down the sink. Of course, you're going to fish that bay leaf out before you eat this, because bay leaves they don't soften up when you cook them. They stay pretty crunchy and unpalatable. So, well, they add their flavor to your food when they're cooking. When you're finished cooking, before I make my lasagna sauce, before I put it together, my pot is full of sauce potential here. All right, well, there's my sauce right now. Kind of a bit watery looking, but in 2 hours, 2.5 hours, that's going to look very different. So I'll show you what it looks like then. So you can see all my nice meat in here and my mushrooms and everything that are down in there, okay? Getting on my sauce to cook, I'm going to be grating some cheese, and I already did my Parmesan cheese. That's about 1/4 cup, because I'm only going to make part of the recipe. I'm not going to make all of it. The full recipe calls for 1/2 cup, and that's about probably 4 ounces of cheese. Now, this is 400 grams of cheese, which is just under a pound. That's probably about 15 ounces. These blocks used to weigh 450 grams, but they shrunk to 400 grams, probably due to customer demand, eh? That's what the manufacturers always say. So 450 grams is almost exactly a pound, whereas 400 grams is more like about 14 ounces. As you can see, I used a very fine grater to grate my Parmesan cheese. I like to buy it in a block and then just grate it myself. But this has been frozen, so it kind of crumbles as you grate it. So I thought, you don't need to see me grating both kinds of cheese. And I'm going to use a coarser grater to grate my mozzarella cheese, because it's just the different textures of the two kinds of cheese. This one is better to grate with a coarser grater. I'm going to grate up this whole block of cheese today, because my recipe calls for 500 grams of cheese for the whole thing. Okay, now I've finished doing up my mozzarella cheese. That's 400 grams, or about 14 ounces of cheese. I grate it up, and that's ready to go on my lasagna when it's time to assemble it. Let's put that over there, and my Parmesan cheese. Take my 2 graters away, and then next thing I have to do is to put water on for my noodles. And I think I'll put a little oil in that water, because that's supposed to help your lasagna noodles from sticking together as they're cooking. Now, I wouldn't bother doing that if I was doing spaghetti or macaroni or other pastas, but with lasagna noodles, they're such big, wide noodles that, I find this really does help a bit. So I'll come back when I've got my lasagna noodles cooked, because all you have to do is read the box when it comes to cooking the noodles, or you might decide to buy the pre-cooked ones and save yourself some trouble. Here I am back again, and my lasagna, the meat sauce, has been cooking for 1.5 hours. So that looks a little different than what you saw before, 1.5 hours ago. And that's going to go in my lasagna. And I have my noodles right here. They're all nice and cooked too, so let me just show you those. Those are my cooked lasagna noodles. I did about half of the 500 gram or 1 pound 16 ounce package of noodles. So probably won't need quite all that many noodles, but let's just be sure, okay? So I have cottage cheese, and when I was putting this together, I forgot to put a teaspoon of sugar in, but I remembered while it was cooking, so that part didn't get recorded, but there you go. The teaspoon of sugar went in. Okay, now to assemble my lasagna. So it says first to take a small spoonful of your meat sauce and put that in the bottom to cover the bottom of your pan, so that you don't have your noodles stick to the bottom of your pan like glue. It should be very unpleasant. Okay, so now that's on there. Now it says to put lasagna noodles on next. So here go my lasagna noodles, and this pan is the right width to do three widths across here. And they're still a little bit hot, and I'm just going to fold over any extra noodles there to fill in that. When you're cooking them, make sure you give them a little stir, just to make sure that they don't stick. And sometimes they like to get together and cook one on top of the other, which means they slow themselves down cooking. So keep an eye on for that. But they like to absolutely flat on the bottom of your pan, and then they stick to the bottom of the pan. I'm going to discourage that too. I just got to give them a little, keep them circulating in the pot, right? So now I have my sauce on the bottom, my layer of noodles on top. Now I'm going to put my cottage cheese on top, which I have to keep as a secret from my husband because he hates cottage cheese, but he likes it in lasagna because he doesn't know it's here. None of these layers are very thick, but I'll tell you, when this is finished, if you went to the grocery store and bought one of those pre-frozen lasagnas, you get a whole lot of noodles, very little cheese, and very little meat sauce. The one thing about making it yourself, you're going to get lots of meat sauce and cheese, and you decide how many noodles you have. Now after that, I put some mozzarella cheese on top, and now some more meat sauce. But this time I'm going to put a real layer of meat sauce instead of just a little sampler. I'm just going to put that on here. This is going to be a very substantial meal, and it would be a substantial meal for 4 people. So I'm just going to be, we'll cook this up tonight, and my husband and I will have half tonight and half tomorrow night. And I'll probably put a side of salad with this. There we go. Just make sure I've got a nice cover over here of my meat sauce. Now I'm going to keep repeating that until I'm finished with all of my stuff and my pan is full. So I'll just keep on now with the grated Parmesan goes on top here. That's going to be sprinkled on here. They change the packaging on something, look at it carefully because they probably snuck in a little shrinkage. Now, the package will be the same size, but what you get in it will be a lot less, let me tell you. Speaking from experience from the 70s when inflation was running much worse than it is right now, but still, the inflation now could get that bad. And you want to make sure you have food to put on the table for your family and save as much as you can to pay those more expensive oil bills, more expensive gas bills, and all the other electricity, more expensive food at the grocery store. Stretch your budget, make it go further. Nowadays, people don't use cottage cheese when they're making lasagna. They use ricotta cheese. But because back in the 70s, when this recipe was in use, you would have to have gone to a specialty store to find ricotta cheese because it wasn't available in the local grocery stores. Things were a lot more limited back then than they are now. So nowadays, if I was doing this recipe and I was going to one of the big grocery stores, I'd probably just buy some ricotta cheese instead of. And one last layer of mozzarella cheese, a nice thick one to get this golden brown appearance on top. And I'm just going to throw the rest of this Parmesan on top. Now there's my lasagna all ready to go in the oven, and I think I may have to put that on a sheet pan to make sure it doesn't go blop all over the inside of my oven. Now that goes into a 350-degree oven for half an hour, and that's let's see, that's 172 I think Celsius. Don't worry, all the Celsius equivalents and everything will be in the recipe below when I get this posted and when I'm writing this up. Well, I hope you enjoyed my recipe. I'm going to bring you back again when I take this out of the oven and I'll show you the finished product. I'll be back. Well, hello everybody once again, and now it's been half an hour plus a bit since I was last here and put this in the oven. And as you can see, look at my beautiful golden brown cheese on top. And good thing I put this pan underneath because I guess I got a little generous with the sauce and it's kind of spilled out around the sides. But that's okay. It's a gorgeous looking lasagna, and I know it's going to taste as good as it looks. I just hope I can get a nice picture of it because, well, it looks like it might be a bit messy to serve up. Anyway, I'll give this a cut and put some on a plate, and I'll show you some pictures of what it looks like served up. It might not look quite as nice and neat and tidy as the ones you buy, but that's because I don't have all kinds of noodles in there to keep it together. I've got lots of meat sauce and cheese in there. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed my recipe today, and I hope you will like and subscribe to my channel and maybe put a comment below. And if you tried this recipe, let me know how it turns out for you. Uh-oh, I've totally forgotten my grandson's Lego today, so hang on one second. Okay, grandson, I'm sorry. I forgot about your Lego, and here it is. It's going to help me cut up this lasagna, and hopefully it won't go and hopefully my lasagna isn't going to go everywhere. I miss you and I love you and I can't wait to see you again. Until then, I'll keep your Lego nice and safe, and it's going to be helping Grammy cooking now and in the future till you take it back. Bye for now, everyone, and I can't wait for you to come back next time and watch me on Ruby's Classic Cooking. Bye for now.